I didn't grow up with a Black experience, but I'm here because of a Black experience. So when we talk about the Great Migration, we can't forget these silent migrators, like my great-grandmother Lola. They weren't just crossing state lines, but they were crossing color lines. Did she unlock all the doors to freedom and opportunity that she had hoped for? Or did she simply step into another kind of a cage? Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and thank you so much for being with me here on my channel, where we have been diving into American identity. And I lost my voice last week, so I have a coffee here. I'm gonna be trying to quietly sip on. But there's this video that I've been sitting on probably for a year. And every time I try to start this video, I get emotional, and I think like not in a good way. I feel like it's hard to talk about this, but I think it's the time. And so I want to start with a quote from a scholar named Emmett J. Scott. And this is what he said. He said, "They left as though they were fleeing some curse. They were willing to make almost any sacrifice to obtain a railroad ticket, and they left with the intention of staying." When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, less than 8% of the African American population lived in the Northeast or the Midwest. But by 1900, approximately 90% of all African Americans still resided in the South. However, migration from the South has been a significant feature of the Black American story. So there was an early exodus from the South between 1879 and 1881, and about 60,000 African Americans moved to Kansas, and some settled in the Oklahoma territories. But in the early decades of the 20th century, the movement of African Americans to the North increased tremendously. And there are many reasons for this Great Migration, as it is called. It's complex. And part of the reason that this story is something that I've been sitting with for a while is because to go back to a history that I learned about the Great Migration in school. I understood, and we're going to talk a little bit about it in this video. I understood why African Americans were fleeing the South, why they were heading up north, why they were heading to the Midwest. But I didn't think that my family's story was tied to that. So picture this, America, 1920s, the jazz age is in full swing, flappers are dancing, the Charleston, and something incredible is happening down south. 6 million African Americans are packing their bags and they're heading north in what we now call the Great Migration. But what if I told you that this migration actually led to a complicated relationship with whiteness for some within the Black community? So let's pause for a moment to understand first the gravity of the Great Migration. So between 1916 and 1970, nearly 6 million African Americans moved out of the South, and they moved from rural South really into urban centers in the Northeast, in the Midwest. And they were fleeing, for the most part, oppressive Jim Crow laws and seeking better economic opportunities and looking for a life where lynchings and racial segregation were not the norm. So this mass migration drastically reshaped the American demographic landscape, infusing the Northwest with vibrant African-American culture, with cities like Chicago being transformed, Detroit being transformed, New York being transformed. And my great-grandmother Lola was one of them. So this was a time, remember, when in Southern laws, Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation, leading to limited opportunity and just a terribly squeezed, dangerous life for people of color. You know, in Louisiana, the lines between Black and white were becoming etched in stone. You know, Louisiana historically has had this history of almost a tri-caste system. And as we were edging into, you know, the 20th century, things are getting more Black and white. And up north, though, things were a bit murkier. And my own family story speaks to this. Were they without discrimination up north? No, absolutely not. They were absolutely discriminated against. But were they segregated the same way? No. Were they in danger the same way? No. And in the north, particularly cities like New York, offered economic opportunities with less stringent racial barriers, thanks to the less pervasive reach of Jim Crow laws. Now, does that mean that hearts and minds were just open and welcoming up north to people of color? No, of course not. But it's just, we know it's not the same thing. So Lola left her family, her history, my history, her identity, and what I imagine a few small bags, and headed to New York. Now, remember, this is the time when the Harlem Renaissance is unfolding, and there's this obvious tension between the North and the South, and you can see the discrepancy so clearly. But putting Lola's story in a historical context, I could see that what she did, it fit this pattern of this Great Migration to a T. It fit it exactly. It was very jarring to me. And we grew up in New York, but there is a price to pay sometimes for these opportunities. The influx of European immigrants to America during the 19th and 20th century had already begun to shift these boundaries of, who is in the accepted group, who could fit in. And I think it really provided an opportunity for Lola to try to slide in under the radar. But here's where the story takes the twist. You see, the Great Migration is a story, I think, of opportunity and freedom and passing in many ways. But I think it also came with its own set of chains. Is it a freedom if you have to forsake who you really are? Passing gave Lola access, in some ways, I would think, to things that she wouldn't have had an opportunity for in Louisiana. The Civil Rights Act was still many decades away, and I think passing was a strategic way to circumvent, this institutionalized racism of the time. But I do think about how with every step forward she took in her life in Albany, New York, where I was born, there must have been a step back in her connection to her community and her family. The Great Migration was more than just a movement of people. It was a migration of identity for many families, including mine. And I wondered, did Lola find what she was looking for? Did she unlock all the doors to freedom and opportunity that she had hoped for? Or did she simply step into another kind of a cage? And I think despite landmark victories in racial equality, such as the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that doesn't change hearts and minds, right? Laws do not change hearts and minds. And so when I'm looking back at the story of the Great Migration, I wonder how many other Lolas are there? And what does that mean for our understanding of race, of identity, and the American dream? How many other people are like me who don't know the full story of a grandparent, of a great-grandparent, and they may never know? So when we talk about the Great Migration, we can't forget these silent migrators, like my great-grandmother Lola, who they weren't just crossing state lines, but they were crossing color lines. This has been a difficult topic because, as of sharing so much on this channel and doing all of this in public and kind of wrestling with what do you do now with this information? I think in my heart, the hope is that this is something that unifies. This is something where I didn't grow up with a Black experience, but I'm here because of a Black experience. That just shows just how interconnected we are when we pass people on the street. When you pass someone in the store, you may look at them and say, this person is so different from me. They have no idea the experiences I've gone through. They could never understand. They think this, 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 and this. And we make these snap judgments. But when we start looking into our family story, when we start looking at where did our family come from, how am I here? And so I would love to hear your thoughts if you had family that migrated during the Great Migration. And it's interesting to think about the Great Migration not just as a time of physically migrating across state lines, but a time of crossing color lines as well. If you would like to watch the docu-series I did, Finding My Family's Hidden History, going down to Louisiana and uncovering the truth, I'll leave a link right here for you. And if you are interested in saving parts of your family story, go to newyorktonashville.com, nytonashville.com. I have some free downloads there to help get you started, and we will talk soon. Document an event, solve a family mystery, understand more about a grandparent. So incredibly passionate about saving family stories, including your family story. So now I'm thrilled to share my process with you. It's important before beginning any journey to have a game plan, to have a map. And there are 5 tasks in this course you can follow at your own pace. If you want to have something to share, something that is easily shared, easily savable, we want to get organized and we want to have a goal and we want to have a plan.